Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked someone in the eyes, someone who thought they had control over you, and realized, I'm not the same person anymore? That moment, that exact moment, it's not quiet, it's not subtle, it's a damn earthquake. Because when a narcissist sees that you've changed, really changed, they panic. Why? Because their power, gone. Their manipulation doesn't work anymore. And the version of you they controlled, dead and buried, this moment, your moment, isn't just about leaving the past behind. It's about stepping into the version of yourself that refuses to play small ever again. So buckle up, because we're about to talk about the power, the freedom, and the fire that comes alive the moment a narcissist sees you've changed forever. You know that moment when something clicks inside you and you realize you're finally done? Not just irritated, not just upset, done. That's the moment we're talking about. The moment when the fog clears, your nervous system settles, and your voice, the one you silenced for years, finally speaks up and says, "No more!" You don't need to scream it. You don't even need to say it out loud, but the energy, it shifts. That's what a narcissist sees, that shift, that silence, that unshakable calm. And they know instantly that they've lost something they never thought they would: control. See, narcissists feed on patterns. Your predictability is their playground. They know what buttons to push, what words to use, what version of guilt to sprinkle on you to make you shrink. And you may and played along for months, years, maybe decades. You said yes when you wanted to say no. You apologized just to keep the peace. You twisted yourself into knots trying to please someone who made it their mission to never be pleased. But now, you've stopped playing the role. You've changed the script. You're not begging for their love anymore. You're not trying to prove your worth. You're not explaining, defending, or justifying anything. You've gone quiet, but powerful. And that silence, it's deafening to a narcissist. What they see is someone who no longer flinches, someone who no longer reacts the way they used to, someone who isn't hooked by manipulation or drawn into chaos. When you change, really change, you become unpredictable. That's terrifying to someone who counted on your weakness. Your strength exposes their fragility. Your growth makes them feel smaller. Your peace, it disturbs their chaos. And their instinct is to pull harder, to poke more, to test if your change is real or just temporary. But here's the truth. When change is real, when it's rooted in self-respect and not just rage, it holds. You don't go back. It's not about revenge. It's about freedom. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. You start living differently, speaking differently, walking into rooms like you belong, because you finally believe you do, and you stop looking to broken people to give you the love you were always supposed to give yourself. That's the moment a narcissist sees you've changed forever. When your power stops being negotiable, they try to bait you. They pretend they've changed. They test the boundaries they used to walk right over. But you're different now, not harder, not colder, just clearer. You know who you are. You know what you'll tolerate. You know that your time, your peace, your heart, they're not up for grabs, not anymore. And when they realize they can't reach you the way they used to, that's the exact moment they realize they've lost their grip forever. When a narcissist realizes you've changed, they don't just see a new version of you. They see a threat to the entire dynamic they built. You were never just a partner, a friend, or a child to them. You were a mirror, a tool, someone they sculpted with manipulation, guilt, fear, and charm. Your identity was never fully yours in their eyes. It was something they molded, managed, and fed off of. So when that version of you starts slipping through their fingers, when the person who used to bend now stands tall, they go into panic mode. Not because they love you, not because they want to fix things, but because they're losing control of their carefully crafted illusion. A narcissist survives through control, emotional, psychological, even physical. They build entire strategies around your weaknesses, your patterns, your pain. They memorize your insecurities. They study your silence. They know exactly what to say to get you to question yourself. And when you no longer react the same way, their whole system malfunctions. It's like trying to use an old password that suddenly doesn't work anymore. And that frustrates the hell out of them, not because they're heartbroken, but because their influence has expired. This is the phase where you'll see their tactics shift. First comes the confusion. Why are you acting like this? Then the guilt trips. After everything I've done for you? Then the gaslighting. You're overreacting. You've changed. And they're right. You have changed. You're no longer handing them your peace just to avoid conflict. You're no longer shrinking yourself just to make them feel bigger. You're no longer apologizing for having boundaries. You've realized that you don't owe anyone your silence to keep them comfortable. That shift in you, it's not just personal, it's powerful. And it disrupts every dynamic they've counted on. They start to panic because for the first time, they can't predict you. They can't get the same reactions. Their power no longer works. And what does a narcissist do when they feel powerless? They double down. They try to hoover you back in with fake apologies, performative vulnerability, or promises they never intend to keep. But the difference now? You see it. You hear their words and recognize the pattern behind them. You don't fall for it. Not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself more. And that love for yourself, that is what truly threatens a narcissist. It's not your anger, it's your clarity. It's not your revenge, it's your peace. You've stopped explaining yourself. You've stopped playing their game. You've stopped needing their validation. You've walked off their stage and built your own. And they're left standing in front of a curtain that's finally closed, not because someone pulled it shut on them, but because you walked away from the role you never needed to play in the first place. The most dangerous thing you ever did to a narcissist wasn't yelling, fighting, or even leaving. It was healing, quietly, consistently, without their permission, without their validation, and most importantly, without letting them know. Healing strips a narcissist of their greatest weapon, your unhealed wounds. Because let's be honest, they never controlled the real you. They controlled the version of you that didn't know your worth yet. They fed off your confusion, your self-doubt, your need to be seen. They turned your empathy into obligation, your forgiveness into permission, your love into leverage. But then you changed. And not in the dramatic, scream it from the rooftop kind of way. You changed in the deep, subtle, powerful way that only healing brings. You started choosing peace over chaos, silence over drama, boundaries over people-pleasing. You stopped needing them to explain why they hurt you because you finally accepted that their behavior had nothing to do with your value. You stopped arguing. You stopped defending yourself. You stopped being baited. And for the narcissist, that's when the alarm bells went off, because for the first time, they weren't the center of your emotional world. Healing is a quiet revolution. It happens in the moments no one sees. When you choose to walk away instead of engage. When you choose therapy instead of another toxic apology. When you start responding with clarity instead of reacting out of pain. That's what terrifies a narcissist. Not your anger, but your evolution. Not your rage, but your refusal to play small. Because when you heal, you stop handing them the broken pieces of yourself to toy with. You gather them up, you glue them back together, and you do it without asking for their help or approval. They try to pull you back, they test the waters, they push the same buttons that used to work like magic. But something's different now. You're grounded, you're aware, you know what manipulation sounds like, feels like. You recognize the love bombing, the guilt trips, the sudden shift to victimhood. And instead of falling for it, you pause, you observe, you choose differently. And that choice, over and over again, is what makes the change permanent. The narcissist doesn't just lose control when you heal, they lose access. Psychological access. The keys to your mind and heart that they once used at will, revoked. And what replaces them isn't bitterness, it's clarity. You see them clearly, maybe for the first time ever, and you see yourself clearly too. Not as the broken, needy, unlovable person they convinced you that you were, but as someone whole, worthy, and deeply capable of love that doesn't require self-abandonment. They can't follow you where you're going, because healing is a frequency they can't survive in. It exposes them, it starves them, it makes them irrelevant. And when they realize they can't break you anymore, not because you're guarded, but because you're healed, that's the moment they truly understand the old game is over. There's a moment, maybe it comes in the middle of a conversation, maybe it hits you while you're just sitting in silence, when you realize you don't feel fear around them anymore. You don't feel the need to impress, to fix, to explain, or to shrink. That's the moment a narcissist sees the emotional grip they once had on you has completely slipped away. And let's be honest, they can feel it before you even say a word. It's in your posture. It's in your pause. It's in your refusal to chase, defend, or prove. That energy shift, it's unmistakable, and it shakes them. Because narcissists operate like emotional leeches. They depend on your emotional reactions to feed their sense of power, anger, tears, frustration. Even those are wins for them because it proves they still have access to you. They don't care how you respond as long as you respond. That's the real currency. But when you go still, when you disengage emotionally and mentally, that silence, it's not passive, it's power. It tells them everything they need to know. The game is over, and they're no longer in your head. You stop arguing, you stop defending, not because they're right, but because you've realized you don't owe explanations to people who twist them. You don't answer the baiting texts. You don't show up to the guilt trip. You don't take the call just to keep the peace. You start choosing your peace instead. You start recognizing that not every battle is worth your energy, and not every conversation deserves your presence. That internal shift from being reactive to being intentional is what drives them. Absolutely crazy. They'll try to provoke you. Suddenly, they'll become nice again, or cruel, or both, within the same hour. That's not a change. That's a tactic. They're searching for the version of you who would have responded, who would have broken down, cried, begged, or argued. But that version? Gone. Replaced by someone who knows the cost of staying in a space that constantly questions your reality, someone who's finally protecting their energy like it's sacred, because it is. And here's the part that stuns them the most. You don't hate them. You don't love them. You feel nothing. Indifference. That's the death of a narcissist's ego. Because as long as they can spark something, they still feel significant. But when your nervous system no longer responds to their chaos, when your peace is no longer shaken by their disapproval, that's when they know they're no longer relevant in your story. You've emotionally outgrown them. And that's a language they don't speak. That indifference doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from healing. It's earned. You worked for it. You fought through confusion, grief, gaslighting, and guilt. And now you can look them in the eye and not flinch. You can walk away without the urge to look back. That's what real change looks like. It doesn't need to scream to be heard. It's quiet, grounded, unshakable. And to a narcissist who thrives on chaos, your calm is the loudest thing they've ever heard. There comes a point when you don't just realize what they did to you, you realize what you allowed because you didn't know any better. And that realization, it's brutal, it hits hard, but it's also the beginning of something powerful, self-responsibility. Not shame, not blame, just ownership. Because once you take back ownership of your life, your choices, your healing, that's when everything starts to shift. That's when a narcissist sees they're no longer the center of your narrative. You're no longer reacting to their drama. You're writing your own story now, one they're not even a part of. See, narcissists count on your disempowerment. They count on you staying stuck in confusion, constantly questioning whether you are the problem. They plant seeds of self-doubt so deep, you start to believe you need them to interpret reality for you. But when you start asking hard questions, when you start doing the work, they get nervous because your healing is not just a personal win. It's a direct challenge to the false reality they built. They needed you to stay confused, but you didn't. You got clear. And that clarity, it's everything. You start noticing patterns, not just in them, but in yourself. Why you tolerated the disrespect, why you mistook intensity for love, why you abandoned your own needs to keep the peace, and instead of beating yourself up for it, you meet yourself with compassion. You realize, I did the best I could with the awareness I had, but now I know better. And that mindset right there is untouchable. That mindset is the end of manipulation. Because now they can't guilt you. They can't gaslight you. They can't twist your reality because you've reclaimed it. This is when they really start to panic, not because they care about you, but because they're losing access to the version of you they could exploit. You're no longer emotionally available for their chaos. You've stopped giving second, third, and 10th chances. You've stopped negotiating your boundaries, and you've stopped mistaking their promises for progress. You used to hope they'd change. Now you hope they get help, and you're not sticking around to see if they do. You stop entertaining the cycle. The apologies without action, the tears without change, the same conversation on a different day. Because you finally understand that closure doesn't come from them, it comes from you. You stop seeking validation from someone who invalidated you for years. You stop hoping for accountability from someone who's never owned a thing. And you stop waiting for an apology that's never coming. You give yourself the closure, the permission, the peace. That's the moment you become untouchable, not because you're perfect, but because you're finally aligned with the truth, your truth. And when a narcissist sees that they can no longer shape your reality, when they realize you're no longer interested in convincing them of your worth, they lose all power. You didn't just walk away, you rose. And you did it without asking anyone for permission. There's something magnetic about your energy when you finally choose yourself, not in a surface level, look at me kind of way, but in the quiet, grounded way that radiates, I know who I am now. That energy speaks before you do. And narcissists, they feel it instantly. They sense that something's different. You're not chasing. You're not performing. You're not emotionally available in the way you used to be. And for them, that shift is like hitting a wall because narcissists are addicted to being needed. The moment you no longer need their approval, their attention, or their crumbs of affection, they start losing grip. Fast used to light up when they gave you even the smallest bit of validation. You used to bend over backward for a compliment, a little affection, anything that made you feel seen. And they knew that. They strategically gave just enough to keep you hanging on. It wasn't love. It was control disguised as connection. But then, one day, it stops working. Not because they changed, but because you did. You started validating yourself. You started becoming the source of your own confidence. You stopped asking, what do they think of me? And started asking, what do I think of me? That's the shift that changes everything. You no longer see their silence as punishment. You see it as a gift. You no longer crave their attention. You crave your own peace. And when you stop engaging, when you stop playing the emotional ping pong game that used to exhaust you, they lose the ability to anchor themselves in your reaction. Your detachment is not cruelty, it's clarity. And narcissists don't know what to do with clarity. They can't manipulate it. They can't confuse it. They can't twist it into something else because it's solid, it's unwavering, it's real. They'll test it, of course. They'll dangle old dynamics in front of you like bait, a flirty message, a fake apology, a sudden burst of charm, but where it used to pull you back in now, you see it for what it is, empty, predictable, desperate. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain why you're not answering. You don't need to justify why you're done. You just are. And that stillness, that self-assurance, that's your power. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you didn't love them. It means you finally learned to love you more. It means you stopped tolerating breadcrumbs from someone who feasted on your effort. It means you stopped hoping they'd become the person they pretended to be. Because now your standards have evolved, and with higher standards comes emotional freedom. The kind they can't offer, can't fake, and can't handle. They'll call it cold. They'll call it selfish. But what it really is, growth. And growth, to someone who refuses to change, is always threatening. You choosing you is the exact moment they lose access, not because you locked the door, but because you finally realized you never needed them to open it in the first place. You were always the key.